how have you like iterated or essentially practiced as an educator or as a computer scientist?
So this is another plug for like summer camps because there's like no stakes in summer camps. So if I wanted to try out a particular like pedagogy strategy or something like that, I could do it with like these kids. And if I messed it up, we'll go take a break and come back in and we'll just try something else. And so like I would test a lot of things and get things wrong a lot, kind of working at these like academic summer camps, which was like a real thing. So for example, I wanted to try out this teaching strategy called PRIM, which is like predict, run, investigate, modify, make. And it's for like teaching new syntax and things like that. And I thought it was really cool. And I didn't want to just like plan like lesson after lesson after it. So I happened to be teaching an academic summer camp. And I was like, I'm going to try teaching this to you this way. Let's see how it goes. And then I could like iterate from there. So like having like safe spaces to do that, throughout the academic year, that could be like a coding club that you run with students, or it could be sort of like weekend workshops or something, like give opportunities for students to learn computer science outside of the classroom. And then you get to practice, your pedagogy as well, which is like super cool.
Me being a musician, like I'm constantly thinking of like ways to refine my abilities as a musician, but that also can be applicable in my abilities in computer science or as an educator.
A lot of like reflecting and also like data gathering, like asking students like, how is this going? How have you liked this so far? Like, how does this feel? And like check-ins on like new pedagogy and like reflecting on that. And like the place that I do a lot of that is like I've kept like a blog for a long time. Like I had it when I was a math teacher, and now I have it like a little bit as a computer science teacher. And I don't really like promote it a whole lot anymore because it's not necessarily for like other people. Like it's there for me. Like that's where I'm like reflecting on and compressing, and it serves as like a timestamp for me as I'm like working through different things. And that's been really important for like my practice of just like reflecting on how things have been going and ways to improve. And sometimes in writing those reflections, like I figure it out, I get unstuck. Same thing with coding. Like when you talk to a rubber duck, I'm just talking to a blog post.
Yeah, and the idea of experimenting with your pedagogies and whatnot, that really resonates with me. One of the things that I would constantly do is be like, hey, I'm going to try out this new thing today. Let's just see how it goes and give me your feedback and we'll experiment. Another thing that I really valued was I had the opportunity, like in music education in particular, to work one-on-one. Like we're going to play drum set, or I'm going to teach you how to do marimba. And then all the way up to like, I'm working with 150 kids all in a marching band setting, and like I'm running the entire rehearsal kind of a thing. So like knowing the different approaches when you're working with somebody one-on-one versus when there's 150 kids in front of you, like having that ability to kind of like go from small to large group and whatnot, that has also been helpful for me and experimenting in all those like in-betweens.
And I think you said something that's important too, is just like the ability to be vulnerable and just be like, we're trying this out. We're gonna see how it goes. And depending on like the relationships you have with students and the culture you've created, like sometimes folks are into that and sometimes they're not. I usually don't do that with like my intro classes first. Like usually students I've had for a couple of years, I'm comfortable being like, hey, we're gonna try this thing out. And like we'll see how it goes. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow, maybe we won't. We're gonna figure this thing out together. And that's how I've landed on like some things that I think have been really successful in my practice, by like iterating with response from students and hearing students and them knowing that they're a valuable part of like that feedback process too.
Yeah, and a lot of the experimentation that I've done has been based on research, but also another good chunk of it has just been based on like intuition and like the kids that I'm working with, and just like, let's just try this thing. I just came up with this idea. Let's just see how it works. I've never seen anyone do it before, but we'll see how it goes.
And like the other thing that makes me think of is my first year teaching, I taught geometry, and that's all I taught, 5 sections in a row, all geometry. And because it was my first year teaching, the way I taught the lesson the first period was usually never the same as when I taught it the last period. Like by the time I got to the end of the day is when I was like, oh, okay, I figured out how this lesson goes. So that was like a big part of iterating when I was like teaching geometry. It was just like, oh, like I know immediately this lesson did not go very well. And so I can start making adjustments as I repeat it. And that's also one of the things that I think is like tough about computer science, is a lot of times you're siloed and you only teach the lesson like once, and then you just have to like go with that, and you don't have that chance to iterate on it. Like that was something I missed transitioning from like math to computer science, is like so often you just have one class of one type, and then you have to like mentally code switch after you teach a lesson into like the other lesson for the other type of class. And so you don't get that like iterative and reflective moment as easily. You have to really work at it to try and do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So like when I taught general music, if there were 5 fifth grade classes, I would teach the same lesson that week 5 times. And sometimes I would teach it in the same way, like literally one class, and then I teach the exact same lesson to the very next class that walk in the door, and it'd be night and day in terms of reception. And so that's when I realized, like, oh, well, if they have a pizza party right before coming to your class, that's going to change things, and if they don't. So like having that like A/B test like really helped me out to understand that it's not always my fault if a lesson doesn't go well, even though I like to think of the things that I can do to improve it, even when it's like heading down that path. It's sometimes it's out of your control.
So speaking of like moments where I wish I could go back and change things, and also like moments when I should have listened to students and didn't, was like in one of like my math intervention classes, we had like a quiz scheduled that day. And so I was like, all right, here's how we do quizzes. You sit here and you do this and you do that, and you're going to carceral pedagogy and you're going to sit here and do it like this. And a kid came in late, and he had like a little bag. We had a photo class at our school and usually held like a camera, and there was just something very off about what was happening. And like everyone kind of noticed, and I didn't care. I was like, you're late. We're taking a quiz. Sit down and you're going to take a quiz. And just everyone was distracted. And I was annoyed because everyone was distracted. And come to find out, like a little later in taking the quiz, this kid had like found a kitten on campus, and the kitten was in that little bag. And so no one was like paying attention. And if I had just stopped and like had a conversation with that student and been like, what's going on? What's happening right now? We could have like done better things for that kitten. And like, I could have just like salvaged that moment, and then we could have actually taken the quiz. Like that's 100% me just feeling locked into a way of doing things that I didn't have to be. There was no reason for me to do that. Stop and listen to kids. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, I've got many examples similarly in terms of just things I reflect on and go, oh, I wish I would have done that differently. Like if I only knew then what I know right now.
Mm-hmm.
This excerpt of the CSKA podcast is from episode number 47, which is titled From Matthew McMatherson to Cody McCoderson, an interview with Dan Schneider. You can listen to this full episode, as well as hundreds more, by searching for the CSK8 podcast on your favorite podcast app, or by going to jaredoleary.com.